Jim is going to talk now about what we used to do as a planner.
Way back when.
Way back.
What we thought we'd do is take those four elements, which are really the elements out of the APA statement. And by the way, I am a member of APA. I've been a member for 32 years. But the focus of what they are interested in has changed over the years. So instead of being more locally focused, it's focused on other things. And by that, and why that's important, is the emphasis and the time spent by the local planner has changed. They can't focus on local issues all the time. They can't focus on local needs. They're concerned about sustainability. They're concerned about smart growth. They're concerned about greenhouse gases. And why that's important is that that does not come from you in the audience. That comes from someone else. So if you have an 8-hour day and you're expected to meet the needs of you, the citizens, well, these other things are starting to crowd it out. So you spend less time. So therefore your attention has changed, your focus has changed. What I was telling Bob before the meeting is, please don't run to your local council and say, you're not doing these things any longer. Well, they are. They're just not as focused on them. Their attention is diverted. They're looking at them differently. What's the next one? Foreseeable future. That is so important. My son is 19. When he was born, his mother and I thought, you know, we'd like him to go to college. That was a foreseeable future. We could understand that time period. He's in college. He's 19. So we fulfilled that window, if you will. But what happens after that? How do you look at future generations? I don't know if he's going to get married. I hope he gets married. I hope he has a family. I hope he has a job he loves. But I don't know anything about that, and I can't predict that. I can't predict in my job what I'm going to work on in 2 months. So we need to have an intuitive understanding of what the future period really is, instead of just saying, in the next 100 years we have to plan for. You can't do that. Protect the environment. Zoning and planning started off with health and safety. I'll mention one word, tenements. What does it bring to mind? Crowding. It brings together disease, fire hazard. Zoning was set up to allow light and air to come in, to prevent fire from being spread place to place. People didn't understand disease then, but they understood that there was spacing and open space, that there was less of it. So we do that, and they do it now. But now it's taken to the extreme. We need study after study after study. And all of a sudden, the environmental document in the minds of the public decides whether or not a project gets approved. And that isn't the way it should be. And that's not the way it is actually in the law. But the perception is you rely upon the environmental document to determine the appropriateness of a project. What's our next one? Oh. What's in your city? Cities are places for human habitation. They're urban places. You live, work, and play there. We have always decided if there's enough parkland, fire service, jobs, housing. But now the balance is the regional balance. We have to make sure homes are allocated properly throughout the region. Well, what about your city? Housing in each city is fundamental to your civic development. If you have large lots and apartments, you have two different types of people. You have people who have different income levels, different positions, different status, if you will. They may be young, they may be old and retired, they may be business leaders, they may be employees starting at the bottom of the rung. You need that variety of housing types to assist your city in ideas, in leadership, in having good council members, good planning commissioners, good civic leaders to help build your city. Go ahead, Bob.
The aspect that's changing for us in our business is, as Jim pointed out, we really have been doing all the things that sustainability talks about, but really within the parameters of real life and achievable things, things that we can quantify and address. What's happened with sustainable development is that now we're expected to begin re-educating the public. When you go through the American Planning Association policies and a lot of the Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development documentation that's on the website, you're gonna realize that they know what we've been doing won't work anymore. And so what they have started to do, actually they've been doing this now for about 10 to 15 years, is they are re-educating the public. They are re-educating the policymakers. They are re-educating our judiciary. They are re-educating our children. Not too long ago, in fact it was just a couple of weeks ago, I saw an article in the Press Enterprises, which is our local newspaper in Riverside. The article basically said that 70% of the children coming out of high school and entering college are now on the liberal left. Well, that's interesting, but when you think about it, you have to ask yourself, well, why? Why is 70% of the kids coming out of high school and going into college liberal left? What's changing? What's happening in that high school? Well, what's changing is this. They are re-educating the youth to begin to adapt to this whole new way of thinking. So we have to practice with a new mindset. We have to change the vernacular, the type of language we use, and we have to basically create a whole new industry of planning, which when you look at a college program now for planning and master's degrees in planning, it's completely different from what we used to have. It's just based on an entirely new world vision. So the question that we have then is, how can that be done? Well, for one thing, they make it very plain that this cannot be done with the regulations that we have. And so there are going to be a lot of new regulations that are going to have to come down out of Sacramento and out of the federal government that are going to begin changing how local governments do business. This isn't a matter of local governance being able to decide how they will live and how their community is shaped. It's going to be a matter of basically working with those local planners. Those local planners now have to be re-educated to understand how sustainable development is implemented within the community. This means that they now have to start becoming social engineers, so to speak, because they have to deal with social equity, they have to deal with environmental justice, they have to deal with social justice, they have to deal with racial justice, they have to deal with all kinds of aspects that are really not the job of a planner. But that's where it's going. And the other thing is that it cannot be done without the change in your mindset. That means that we really have to change how we have been viewing things all along. Our mindset has to change. One of the classics, and I'll have a slide on this this evening, is that they cannot accept the fact that property rights are primary. They cannot accept some of the language, for example, that's in our Constitution, which is the reason why Ruth Bader Ginsburg was recently on Egyptian television saying that if she were to start over and write a whole new constitution for a government, she would not use the U.S. Constitution as the base. She would use something that was more recent, that reflected the contemporary mindset that we're dealing with today. That's not where planners should be, and that's not where our legislators should be. They should be basing what they do on the Constitution of the United States and on the founding principles that we established this country on, which was on the individualism of every single person and every community in this country. The other thing is that it cannot, as I pointed out, it cannot be done without our current Constitution and economic system, and that's what they're against. They're going to change it, and when our administration is currently in place said that we're talking about major change, that's the major change. Those things have to change, and that re-education process has to keep going. If you were afraid of someday the government locking you up in a prison camp, in a re-education camp with bars and basically changing over how you think, you don't have to worry about that. It's going on right now. No bars, no jails, no anything. It's happening as you live and breathe and as you go about your daily activities. When you watch television, when your kids go to school, when you read magazines, when you read the newspaper, that re-education process is an ongoing thing, and it's happening. So what can we do? Well, we're going to have to start locally. We're going to have to start being active locally, start changing the way that we push back locally, because you can't just accept these things and just say, well, you know, it's all for the better. No, it isn't, because those drastic changes will mean the loss of a lot of rights. The question is what are those changes worth? Are they worth giving up your liberty? As we showed from Benjamin Franklin, if we're going to give up liberty for just a little bit of security, then we've lost it. It's gone. The other is planning level. I mean, we have to really begin dealing with our planners and our legislators on the type of regulations that they pass and how they enforce our land use plans and our general plans. Go to those meetings, go to the planning commission meetings, go to the city council meetings and begin giving them your input. Listen to what's going on. If you don't, it's just going to happen, and then you're going to be sitting wondering, how did this all happen? It will just do it. The education level is also, as I pointed out, our kids are being educated. We're giving over that education to a state school system, essentially, that's programming these kids to go that way. If you don't get involved with that, that's the way it's going to happen. Inactivity is basically giving up. As Bonhoeffer said, or Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, that you know, if you don't take a stand, you took a stand, and that's the way it is. And then on a market level, we really have to start pushing free market principles and free market activity. You know, when a developer shows up at a city council meeting with his project, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that that room will be packed with environmental groups. They'll bus them in from as far away as Tucson, Arizona. Yep. And they'll be there protesting that project. But there's hardly anybody there from the local community to back up that developer. There's nobody there to speak to his side, nobody there to speak to his rights, except for him. And that shouldn't be. We as citizens should be speaking out for the individual rights that we have in this country and for that person's property rights, because it's our property rights as well that we're speaking out for. And then on the individual family level, we really need to work on that, because it's the families that are the basis, the foundation of everything that we have. If we don't work on that, then the rest of the things really won't matter anyway. And so we really have to encourage, through our churches and other organizations, to begin solidifying and strengthening those families in whatever manner you do, whether it's through faith in God or through faith in yourself. But you have to start restoring the family values and make those families strong. So this is kind of a kickoff for our program this afternoon, and Jim and I, we wanted to share what we see as changing in our industry. And we're going to let some of the other folks here talk about this. And again, as I said, it's about getting back to founding principles. We need to reach back and so that we can establish that for our community.
All right, well, let's give them a round of applause. And Robert's closing remarks on what you can do is really what this is all about, because it's one thing to come here and hear about things that trouble us, but if we don't take action, nobody else is going to. And so that's the takeaway from this entire session today, is that we have to put boots on the ground and do what we can to weigh in and protect our property rights. That was a great description and understanding of what happens from an urban standpoint when we talk about environmental engineering, but we're going to shift now to a rural emphasis.